We begin now at the top of Daf Beis Amud Aleph in Meseches Kiddushin. This is Kiddushin Daf 2a. The Mishnah says, Ha'isha niknis b'shalosh derachim. A woman is acquired in three ways. V'kona es atzman, she acquires herself b'shtei derachim, in two ways. And the Mishnah explains, niknis, she can be acquired, that's talking about Kiddushin. She can be acquired b'kesef, b'shtar, or b'biyah, either with kesef, with money, with shtar, with document, or with biyah, with an act of relations. B'kesef, when we talk about Kiddushin with kesef, Beis Shammai omrim b'dinor uv'shaveh dinor. Beis Shammai say it's with a dinor, or with something that's valued at a dinor, that's worth a dinor. Ubeis Hillel omrim b'pruta uv'shaveh pruta. And Beis Hillel say it's with a pruta, or something that is worth a pruta. The kama hi pruta, and what is a pruta? Echad mishmona be'isrei talki. It's 1/8 of the Italian isser. V'kona es atzma beget uvamisas habal. And the woman can acquire herself either by receiving a get, by receiving a divorce, or with the death of her husband. Hayavama, when it comes to a yavama, niknis bebiyah, she's acquired by biyah. A yavama is talking about a case where a woman is married and her husband dies, and they don't have children, and so then she does yibum with her brother-in-law. And again, the way that she's acquired in that situation is through an act of relations with her brother-in-law. V'kones atzma b'chalitza uv'misas hayavam, and she acquires herself with chalitza or with the death of the yavam. And Rashi explains, Ha'isha niknis labala, a wife is acquired by her husband, b'shalosh derachim kin mefarish v'azil, in three ways, as will be explained. V'hai shalosh lashon nekevahu, the word shalosh is a lashon nekeva, it's feminine of a Gemara boy, amai tana lashon nekeva. The Gemara will ask, why are we using a lashon nekeva? V'kones atzma b'shtei derachim garsin, she acquires herself in two ways. V'kones atzma lios birushusa, what does that mean, she acquires herself? Meaning she's under her own authority, lehinase la'acher, meaning that she can marry someone else. Bekesef uvishtar mefarish bebraisa begemara. The Braisa in the Gemara explains, no saying la kesef o shava kesef. He gives her money, or he gives you something that's worth a certain amount of money. V'yomer la harayad mekudeshesli, and he says, you are mekudeshes to me. Shtar, what does it mean? He's mekadesh with a shtar. Kosev lo al haniyor. He writes on a parchment, on a document, piece of paper. Afal pisha eno shava pruta. Even though that niyor is not worth a pruta, harayad mekudeshesli, you are mekudeshesli. And so then he gives that to her. So even though he's giving her something that's less than a shava pruta, but the Kiddushin works through shtar. And bia ba'aleh, bia means he has an act of relations with her. V'yamer hiskad shili b'biazu, and he says that there should be a Kiddushin with this bia. The Kulu Yalef Mikrai, all of this is learned from Sukkim, time of the Beis Shammai, Mefarish Begemar, the reasoning of Beis Shammai, again Beis Shammai in the Mishnah, Dinor and Shaveh Dinor, that will be explained in the Gemara. Pruta shal nechoshes, Pruta is made of copper, Isrei Talki shal kesef, the Isrei Talki was made of silver, Vidam of Shmona Prutos, it was worth eight Prutos, Hayavama Niknis Layavam, the Yavama is acquired to her brother-in-law, Bebia, with an act of relations, Leos ki ishto l'chal davar, she's like his full wife in all regards, Shimbala Garsha, that at that point, if he wants to divorce her, Shimbala Garsha Achargach, if he wants to divorce her after, Ein Tzricha Hemenu Chalitza Leget, she doesn't require Chalitza, rather she requires a get. And Rashi notes, Aval Shtar v'Kesef, but if one uses Shtar and Kesef when it comes to Yibum, Ein Moilin Bam in HaTorah, that does not work on a Doraisa level, Elamid Rabbanan, that only works on a Rabbanan level, the Tikkun de Mahani Ba Maimer, that's the Takana de Rabbanan, that Maimer is effective when it comes to Yibum, Kidaminan be Yavamas, like we say in Yavamas, Aval Eino Gomer Ba, but it's not a full Kinyan Lios Yarsho Metamela that he inherits her, and he can become Tamiter. V'lo lepochim and a Chalitza, it also doesn't exempt her from Chalitza. The only purpose of Maimer is Elo lepos la shar echav. The only purpose of Maimer is to disqualify her from doing Yibum with the other brothers. And the Gemara says, the Mishnah uses the language of Ha'isha Niknis, the wife is acquired. Ma'ishnacha detani Ha'isha Niknis, what's the difference over here that we use the language of Niknis, the language of acquire? U'ma'ishnahasam, and what's the difference over there in the second parak, detani Ha'ish Mekadesh? It says the man is Mekadesh, that we use the language of Kiddushin. And the Gemara answers, Mishum dekaboy lemisni kesef. The reason is, because in our Mishnah, one of the kinyanim that's going to be listed is the kinyan of kesef, of money. And the Gemara says, V'kesef minolan, and where do we learn kesef from? Gomar kicha mistei Ephron, we learn it out from Gzeir Shava. It says kicha over here, and it says kicha by the stei Ephron, by the field of Ephron. Ksivacha ki yikach ish isha, here it says a man takes a woman. That's the language that it uses, yikach uchsivasam, and it says over there, Nasati kesef hasodek kach mimeni, I gave the money for the field, take it from me. V'kicha ikri kinyan, and we find that kicha is also referred to as a kinyan, because it's also written hasada asher kona Avram, the field that Avram acquired. So you see that kicha is referred to as a kinyan, and that's why over here also, where we're using kesef, and we learn that from the Stei Ephron, we use a language of kinyan. And Rashi explains, in the second parak, he uses the language of Kiddushin, Nisni Hacha Isha Miskadeshes. Here also, it should say Ha'isha Miskadeshes instead of Ha'isha Niknis. And the Gemara answered, Mishum de Kaboy Lemisni Kesef, because among the Kinyanim, Bahani Kinyanim, among the Kinyanim was Kesef. V'amrinu lekalmon Kesef minol and the Niklis Bom and Farshin and the Gamrin Kicha Mistei Ephron. We say later on, where do we learn Kesef from? We say that we learn it from the field of Ephron, the Ikri Kinyan, and that's called the Kinyan. Hilkach Tanahacha Kinyan. That's why over here we use the same language of Kinyan. And Rashi continues, v'chesef minolan, and kesef, from where do we know that? Kinyan lav hacha kaboila, that's not really a question over here. Ela lekamon, that question is actually asked later on. V'hacha hai mitaretz kamer lo lekula milsa, here the person answering the question that the Gemara asked just brings the whole question that's brought later. Mishum de kaboila misni kesef, v'kesef minolan, since we want to list kesef, and where do we know kesef from? Yalfinan le lekamon, that's learned out later on. Mikicha, it's learned out from kicha, v'kicha lashon kinyan, who, and the word kicha is a language of kinyan. For that reason, our Mishnah uses the language of Ha'isha Niknis, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Beis Amud Beis.